This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Israelis prepare for their fourth election in 2 years. Will this one lead to a stable government? And Naftali Bennett, could he be the kingmaker or even become king? Plus, Israel readies itself for war with Iran's Lebanese proxy, Hezbollah. And Joel Rosenberg's new novel about how that very war could unfold. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. In less than 2 weeks, Israelis will head to the polls for the fourth time in 2 years, and the outcome will have a profound impact on the future of the Jewish state and the Middle East. Two major forces currently define Israel's political landscape. One is the left versus the right. The other is those parties against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and those for him. Given that situation, some political observers say Israel may face another election result like the last three.
The dynamics in many ways are still the same. Benjamin Netanyahu is pretty much the favorite to be prime minister again. He's got plenty of challengers. Very few of them like him, and the electorate is deeply divided.
At the moment, Netanyahu and his allies may hold a slim advantage.
It looks like Benjamin Netanyahu and his preferred coalition partners are hovering right around the 61 magic number out of 120 Knesset members, which is what he needs in order to form a majority coalition. But the math is very tenuous.
Math is the key to Israel's elections, and the goal is to get those 61 seats in the Israeli parliament to gain a majority and form a coalition. Given the electoral landscape, Naftali Bennett, a former senior member of Netanyahu's cabinet and now head of the right-wing Yamina party, may become a kingmaker.
He is not committed to sitting with Netanyahu. However, unlike the other parties, he has not ruled out sitting with Netanyahu.
Some even think Bennett could become prime minister himself. He told CBN News he's up to the challenge.
Well, I'm running to become prime minister of the state of Israel. It's a huge responsibility. The country is 72 years old. We continue to be threatened by some of the worst countries in the world. Let's cut taxes, cut bureaucracy, speed up the economy in a Reagan-esque way.
Yet the majority of Israelis still prefer Netanyahu. Two issues dominate the minds of Israelis as they go to the polls: restarting the economy and the threat of Iran. The impact of a new U.S. administration is another major factor.
If the United States embarks on a back to the future policy of going back 5 or 6 years to putting more pressure on Israel and easing the breakup on Iran, I think that that's a voting issue that Israelis really have to be concerned about.
What Israelis decide will make a huge difference, not only for Israel, but for the region.
Stability for Israel is key to stability in the Middle East. And if Israel continues to be in chaos and Washington continues to be in chaos, there are going to be a lot of powers around the world tempted to exert their influence and make their mark in the Middle East. And that's probably dangerous for all of us. So it's a good thing to be praying for stability in both capitals.
As we mentioned, Naftali Bennett could become a kingmaker after the next election here in Israel. Here's a look at this power player. His name is Naftali Bennett. He served in one of Israel's elite commando units and made millions as a software entrepreneur. Now head of the Yamina party, Bennett is poised to play a key role in the upcoming election. CBN News sat down with Bennett at his campaign headquarters near Tel Aviv.
How would you look at the electoral map right now, and how does Yamina fit in there?
Because of my unique position in the political scene, where I don't belong to any of the blocs, neither the pro-Bibi or anti-Bibi bloc, I've got the ability and leverage to form a stable right-wing government that'll represent the majority of Israelis, which are right of center, but they also want change.
The upcoming election, like the past three, is a complicated political puzzle that revolves around Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Even though Netanyahu and his Likud party will likely gain the most seats in the election, several parties have vowed they won't serve with him. That narrows his options to form a coalition of at least 61 seats. Bennett has left open the door to join Likud in a right-wing government. That puts him in a position of a likely kingmaker and possibly propelling him to the office of Prime Minister. He tells CBN News he feels up to the job.
And I'm ready to take that responsibility as former defense minister, former entrepreneur and CEO of companies. I think I've got what's necessary to pull Israel out of this hole and sort of go to the next phase of Israel as the startup nation.
Like most Israeli leaders, Bennett warns about the U.S. re-entering the Iranian nuclear deal.
It's a terrible deal, and I want to explain why. It gives a false sense of confidence that we've got Iran covered, but it doesn't. The deal, in fact, allows Iran to proceed to the very verge of acquiring not one nuclear weapon, but dozens. All they need to do is press a button, and they'll have, within days, dozens of nuclear bombs.
Several parties like Benny Gantz Blue and White might not even cross the 3.5% electoral threshold to get into the Knesset. That favors parties like Bennett's. Still, the question remains whether Bennett could unseat Israel's longest-serving prime minister. Voters will answer that question on March 23rd. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to cancel his historic first state visit to the United Arab Emirates after Jordan refused to allow him to fly through its airspace. The misunderstanding revolved around an incident the previous day in which the Crown Prince wanted to come and pray on the Temple Mount. Jordan has religious authority over that area. Netanyahu said the situation was resolved and he had spoken with the leader of the Emirates.
We agreed on three things. First, there will be another visit very soon. Second, we will advance a green passport between Israel and the UAE. Third, and this is very important news to the citizens of Israel, the intention of the UAE, through different means, to invest a huge sum of $10 billion. That's almost 40 billion shekels for different projects.
Coming up, will growing tensions between Israel and Iran trigger the biggest war yet between Israel and Hezbollah?
It was not my grace, but God, that I might come to the Irish nations to preach the gospel.
Now available from CBN Films, I Am Patrick. Get your DVD for a gift of $15 or more. What brings you back, Roman?
People thought that this mission was crazy, that his efforts to Christianize Ireland were doomed to failure.
From slave to missionary.
Who among you heeds the call?
Why would this man put himself in danger among enemies who do not know God?
From sinner to saint.
Patrick's story began a chain of events that is quite remarkable in the impact that it had.
I am Patrick.
Those are the words that begin the history of Ireland.
I Am Patrick. Get your DVD of this inspiring documentary today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs from health to entertainment you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. To watch the CBN News Channel, download the app or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
This Easter, spend time reflecting on Jesus' final week. In CBN's free devotional, The Hope for Redemption, you'll follow his path to Jerusalem, observe his last Passover meal, gain insight to his agony at Gethsemane, witness his crucifixion, and encounter the empty tomb. This Easter, realize afresh that he is risen. Get your free copy today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/Easter Devotion.
Since it's clear the United States will likely re-enter the Iranian nuclear deal, Israel is making its own plans. The IDF has sent signals it would take military action, if necessary, to stop the regime from making nuclear weapons. If such an attack happens, it could trigger the biggest war yet between Israel and Hezbollah, Iran's proxy army. Here's a report I did after visiting the Israeli-Lebanese border. The border here between Israel and Lebanon is deceptively quiet, but on the other side of this fence lies Hezbollah with more than 100,000 rockets that can hit almost anywhere inside Israel.
All of them were brought to Lebanon in order to be launched against Israel one day.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zahavi studies the danger of Hezbollah through her research organization, Alma.
Hezbollah is the proxy of Iran in the region. It's the most professional proxy of Iran in the region. It's the most equipped, dangerous proxy of Iran in the region. And we are here standing, looking in the eyes of Hezbollah. And the people that are raising their kids just a few feet from us, every morning looking in the eyes of Hezbollah.
I'm standing in the village of Hanita here on the Israeli-Lebanese border. Behind me, you can see children playing in this kindergarten, and over here, you can see how close the Lebanese border is. The sense of danger is real and ever present for those living here. In 2006, they lived through a 34-day war, which saw Hezbollah fire nearly 4,000 rockets into Israel. That barrage paralyzed northern Israel, chasing 1 million Israelis to the south, while the rest spent most of that month in bomb shelters. In 2021, the IDF believes Hezbollah is once again considering attacking Israel in what Zahavi describes as days of battle.
Days of battle would mean that the people that are living just here, a few feet from us, would not be able to get out of their home because it will be too dangerous. Meaning that their children will hear the sirens every 2 weeks and will have to run for shelter. This is a reality that is unbearable for the people of the north.
This is the only active border crossing between Israel and Lebanon. The UN base is just down the road within a no man's land, and I'm standing in an IDF base that keeps constant watch over Hezbollah.
Their threat is no joke, and we never underestimate our enemy, but we keep training, we keep practicing, we keep on gathering intelligence and always getting prepared and keeping readiness for the next conflict, for the next fight, making sure we have the upper hand.
Lieutenant Dalton describes Hezbollah's military strategy as one of blending in by creating a virtual civilian camouflage.
Hezbollah decided to take the step and make all of its establishments in southern Lebanon based on civilian clothing, civilian territory, civilian houses, really blend itself, camouflage itself into the population and keep operating in. So they know to hide, whether it's taking over civilian villages or households and really setting base up over there. But our intelligence is strong enough to understand their work and how they operate and to really pinpoint the location of their bases inside civilian territory.
Another hidden weapon in Hezbollah's arsenal is these underground tunnels along the border. CBN News got a rare look into this one that took years to build. Measuring at least 25 stories deep, it had already crossed into Israeli territory before the IDF uncovered and sealed it. Zahavi's organization identified another weapon by exposing Hezbollah assembling precision-guided missiles inside Beirut.
What most Americans, most Christians in the United States, North America, and around the world don't realize is that Lebanon is important to Iran because it is the forward operating base of their most aggressive offensive attack whenever they decide to attack Israel.
Middle East expert and author of the Beirut Protocol, Joel Rosenberg warns what might happen as the Biden administration considers re-entering the Iranian nuclear deal.
If Israel feared that the Biden administration was going to go down some road of negotiations that was short-sighted, ill-conceived, and dangerous, Israel might have to attack to neutralize those sites.
That could trigger Hezbollah.
Iran would unleash a barrage, the most devastating missile attack maybe in the history of mankind. They have upwards of, I hear, 150,000 missiles positioned right across that border, all through southern Lebanon. And they would light up the skies, and all the Israel defenses, all the missile defenses we have, would do some good, but it couldn't possibly stop a barrage of thousands and thousands and thousands of missiles coming in every day.
Israel's leaders realize those dangers. Some believe the IDF's goal would be to make its next response so massive that the next war with Hezbollah would be known as the last. Up next, Joel Rosenberg's new thriller, The Beirut Protocol. A frightening scenario. Could this be what triggers that war with Lebanon?
His story has inspired the world for thousands of years.
Israel's most famous king.
While some scholars doubted his very existence.
You cannot claim that King David is a mythological figure.
Journey deep beneath the ancient city of Jerusalem and see proof of Israel's celebrated hero. Get Written in Stone, House of David. Join host Gordon Robertson on an expedition through the evidence supporting the Old Testament.
Extraordinary discoveries made headlines around the world.
See where the shepherd boy slew the mighty giant.
We are shedding some light on the story of David and Goliath.
Explore the relics of the Davidic age.
There was a significant structure standing here.
And discover proof of King David's legacy.
This is a royal house.
Written in Stone, House of David can be yours for any dollar amount. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com. Available now.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship, dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us regent.
Author Joel Rosenberg's latest thriller, The Beirut Protocol, opens along that very volatile Israeli-Lebanese border. I met with Joel there recently and asked him why he wrote the book.
Joel, great to be with you here on the northern border of the Lebanese-Israeli border. What a great spot to talk about your new novel called The Beirut Protocol, which begins here on the northern border. Tell us about it.
The Beirut Protocol is a political thriller. It's the fourth in the series. And it opens up on a road just like this one, in which Marcus Riker and a team of American and Israeli security officials are doing an advance trip because the U.S. Secretary of State is coming for a visit to deal with peace issues in the region and security threats. The Secretary of State is concerned about Iran's influence in southern Lebanon, that the terror force known as Hezbollah is becoming a very dangerous threat to Israel, to the Arab world, to American interests. So Marcus and his team do an advance trip on a road like this, and a big firefight happens. Terrorist force from Hezbollah starts attacking, and a massive firefight begins. And tragically, Marcus and his team are captured and pulled into a previously unknown terror tunnel and dragged deep into Lebanon.
What do you want to take people into? You're taking, obviously, into a political thriller. What do you want people to take from the book?
I want people to understand that Iran is the most dangerous terror state in the world. Iran has proxy forces. They have terrorist organizations that they fund, that they train, that they arm, that they command. They tell these terror forces what to do. And I regard the three most dangerous ones by the three H's. It's Hezbollah. That's the terror force here that's essentially taken over southern Lebanon. Then there's Hamas, the terror force that keeps firing thousands of rockets and missiles at Israel. That's based in Gaza. There's also the Houthis, the terror force in Yemen that keeps firing hundreds of missiles at Saudi Arabia. And that's what makes Iran so dangerous. It's not just the Iranian military. It's not just the Iranian nuclear program, as dangerous as that is, and that gets all the attention. But it's the fact that Iran is funding, arming, training, supplying, and commanding all these terror forces. And for people who love Israel and who want security and who are excited, like I am, about the Abraham Accords and all the peace deals that are going on, we have to remember they're demonic forces, and they want to rob, kill, and destroy. And while this border looks quiet now, this is the front line of what could be the most dangerous war to erupt anytime in the near future.
We saw what happened in 2006. They're in 4,000 rockets. Many more rockets would make it even exponentially a much more dangerous time.
Yeah, in 2006 there was 4,000 missiles fired from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon into Israel in 34 days. The people I talked to fear there could be 4,000 missiles a day for 34 days or longer. I mean, that's the level of disaster that could be coming. We would never have seen a missile barrage like this in the history of the Middle East, maybe the history of the world. We were just talking a few moments ago to an Israeli intelligence officer that told me, not on camera, but he said to me privately, the next war will be the third Lebanon war. He goes, no, that will be the last Lebanon war. He means Israel would unleash devastating firepower on the nation of Lebanon, a nation that is essentially held captive. It's a hostage by the regime in Tehran.
It seems like a very, very tense time here with Lebanon, and in light of your new novel.
In many ways, we in the West or around the world haven't really been talking about Lebanon, except for the horrific port explosion in August of last year, which left 300,000 people without homes and left many, many dead and wounded and traumatized. But that was a rare moment where Lebanon captured the attention of the world. But the Beirut Protocol was premised on the idea that the next day is coming, that Iran, Lebanon, Israel force itself back onto the world's consciousness. I think that day is coming. I pray that God shows mercy, but that's my fear. And one of the things I try to do in political thrillers like the Beirut Protocol is take people into a world that I pray never happens. People have called me a modern Nostradamus, that you're predicting these things, that you're a prophet. No, I'm a political thriller writer, but trying to project what would it look like if the people who are our worst enemies actually did what they say they're going to do. Sheikh Nasrallah is talking about wiping Israel off the planet, and he's preparing to do it with Iranian help. What if he does it? What if people that are connected with him really try? What might that look like?
What do you want people, after they read your novel, how do you want them to respond?
I don't want us to get into the false sense that just because the Abraham Accords are creating historic, wonderful answers to prayer, peace treaties between Israel and Arab countries, this is good. But there are two cross currents. There are two movements of history happening. Tremendous breakthroughs of peace, but the forces of evil are gathering for the next big battle. And of course, eventually, prophetically, we know that the war of Gog and Magog, this will happen right on these borders. But we need to keep praying and, again, not get lulled into thinking everything's good, everything's fine.
Well, Joel, great lesson to take from your book, and I hope everybody enjoys this novel and takes that lesson to heart.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be with you. I appreciate it.
Still ahead, see how CBN Israel is helping new immigrants during this trying time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for watching Jerusalem Dayline. We're committed to providing you with unbiased reporting from the Holy Land. Through weekly broadcasts, podcasts, and online media, our vision is to reach millions around the globe with the true story of what's happening in Israel and the Middle East, all from a biblical and prophetic perspective. This is a big vision and is only made possible by the generous support of people like you.
Call us toll-free at 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/Jerusalem Dateline and make a donation that will help spread the light of truth about Israel throughout the world. Now, for a limited time, you can get 5 of CBN's critically acclaimed documentaries. Experience the rebirth of the modern state of Israel.
The historic bonds between the Jewish people and the land of Israel cannot be broken.
Relive the battle for Jerusalem in the Six-Day War.
Jerusalem is yours, forever.
Discover how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
When people need us, we volunteer and we come and help.
Explore the world of Israeli technological innovation.
We're people of dreams. God gives us dreams. And that's really the roots, I think, of much of our innovation.
And understand the biggest land dispute in history.
Many Palestinian Arabs claim that the Jews stole Arab land. But is that the real story?
This exclusive Israel DVD collection can be yours for a gift of $40 or more. Call now or go online to get your Israel DVD bundle today.
This Easter from Superbook.
It's a challenge to talk about Jesus to people you don't know.
Chris and Joy discover there are those who need to see to believe.
I want to tell you about Jesus. Forget it. I'm not going to waste my time on people who don't want to listen.
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook's newest episode, Doubting Thomas. And as a bonus, receive the Superbook Easter double feature, which includes The Last Supper and He is Risen as our way of saying thanks.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Nearly 300 new immigrants from Ethiopia arrived in Israel on the final flight of an operation launched by the government in December to bring 2,000 members of the Ethiopian community to the Jewish state. CBN Israel is helping another immigrant family of 6 who recently immigrated from the Ukraine. When the COVID-19 lockdown caused the husband and father of 4 to lose his work for a time, CBN stepped in to help with food during the crisis.
Snezhana's family immigrated from Ukraine to Israel to find a better life. Her husband Sergei works in a factory in Israel. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the factory closed, leaving them with no income.
We were just making enough to get by before, but then Israel went into lockdown and the factories and the schools closed. I couldn't work because I needed to stay home with the children. It put us in a very desperate situation.
Even after Israel eased the lockdown, the schools remained closed and Sergei's work hours at the factory were cut. They didn't know how they'd be able to afford rent or put food on the table.
In the beginning, I was very scared that my children would catch the virus, and then we didn't have any money to buy food. Mentally, it was so hard, and I became very depressed.
Then a local church put them in touch with CBN Israel. We're making sure the family has the food they need, and we're giving them gift cards to help them buy other essentials.
This is the first time in our lives we've gotten help like this. There wouldn't be any food in our apartment if it wasn't for what you've given us. We are so grateful.
Thanks to CBN Israel donors, Snezhana's family and others across the country are getting the support they need during this crisis.
It means so much to know we're not alone in this. You've brought back real hope and joy into our home. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Well, just over a year ago, we met many Ukrainian families who made the decision to come back here to Israel. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.